SkillStruct presents.
Hey everyone, Michael from SkillStruct here, and today we're going to be talking about tech and finance. So who better than Dr. Yves Hilpisch, who is an expert when it comes to AI algorithmic training. He is quite, instrumental in a few books that are out there that are getting people started with programming and also trading. So we're going to have a good conversation about tech and finance, hopefully. This is going to be slightly different. It's not going to be the long format that you tend to see from us with the other previous episodes. Let us know if that's what you like from us. Let us know if you like the longer discussions, and we'll take that forward as we continue this tech series. But anyway, today, we are here to welcome Dr. Yves Hilpisch. Hopefully, we have a great conversation, and hopefully, you lot take something away from this. But Dr. Yves Hilpisch, welcome to the SkillStruct Presents Tech Series.
Thanks for having me.
Perfect. Okay, so basically, how I want to carry this conversation, because I run a network called SkillStruct University, and sometimes we often have very colorful conversations about finance, getting into trading. And I was wondering, since you've run many workshops and you are pretty much an expert when it comes to Python and trading and finance, what is a cool project that you've seen, that you've come across when you leverage, finance, a little bit of programming here and there? So why don't we start off there? Because there might be people listening that want to get started in, finance, maybe want to get a little bit with programming too. Do you know any cool projects, or have you seen one or built one that you would say, hey, this is a cool project if you want to get started?
Yeah, from my point of view, I'm a finance guy through and through, and I love Python. I love all the technologies. There's so many interesting and exciting things out there. It's hard to boil it down, but I know from experience that most people are interested in trading, right? In algorithmic trading. And this has become kind of like a field where even like retail traders, as you would call them, right? Like maybe an individual sitting in front of their, MacBook back home. Maybe they have larger screens and they connect via the internet to some trading platform, and they come up with their bots that trade automatically in the markets. This is what many people are fascinated about. And this has become so easy that I recently published with O'Reilly an article on Medium, which says basically algorithmic trading with 100 lines of Python code, or less than 100 lines of Python code. I don't know how many there were. And in the end, the number 100 was just chosen. Maybe there were just 60 lines of code, and we had a full-fledged trading bot, maybe not production ready from a professional point of view, but this is something what many people are interested in. Even if you want to build a simple robot, let's say, use a Raspberry Pi, and maybe, it's a car or whatever, self-driving car, it's always involved. You need to have dedicated hardware, you need to have specific knowledge to, how to work with cameras and stuff like that. But in the financial market, it's pretty simple. It's just numbers, right? It's numbers, it's APIs. And if you have a bit of Python background, then you are already well equipped to get started immediately. So building a trading bot and trying to make money on your own in the market, or with the help of your trading bot, that's for sure something that almost everybody these days can attack as an exciting project.
Yeah, no, makes sense, of course. And I was also curious, when you're referencing, trading, traditionally you think of like stocks and shares, but obviously, in the past sort of 4 or 5 years, there's been this whole crypto wave. I'm sure, in the circles that you hang with, and obviously the sessions and the training that you provide, you've probably come across, cryptocurrencies. Why don't you unpack what is actually a cryptocurrency, or, just in general, you can reference the different currencies like Bitcoin, Ethereum, et cetera, et cetera. Why don't you talk about what is actually, what are cryptos?
Yeah, of course. Cryptocurrencies have become like a mainstream phenomenon last couple of years, and many people have become rich. Not everybody, right? We have recently seen a larger drop again, so people need to be able to stomach the high volatility and the high variance prices, right? 1 minute you are a millionaire, the other minute you've lost a couple of 100,000. You're in the market. That's not for everybody, but of course, if you have been an early investor, you could make billions and billions. And also, when we spoke about trading and maybe people want to get rich, the technology that you face in these markets, because the markets are so brand new, and the platforms that act in these markets are brand new in terms of, like, when we compare it with the New York Stock Exchange or other exchanges out there, they provide almost perfect technology in order to deploy such bots that I mentioned before, right? So if you want to trade Bitcoin, it's not a big deal in terms of like setting up a trading infrastructure and automating that. But of course, there's like the large groups that do the hodling, right? The holding. They say, well, I'm a big believer. This is the future. And I simply hold it and I invest as much I can, I don't know, over time to get more of that. Of course, there is quite a bit more to the whole space than just making a quick buck. Just being one of the thousands, if not millions of players around the world who try to find their fortunes in there. I personally am a bit more fascinated by technologies that have been combined over the last, let's say, decade and a little bit more in terms of like coming up with all these new things. Because many of the technology building blocks have been around, let's say, hashing, encryption, technologies, the idea of blockchains or what a Merkle tree is all about. So all the single ingredients have been around, but to put them together in a way that now we have trillions in terms of market capitalization, that we have millions, as I said, that are interested in the field or have entered the field. This is what is really fascinating about it. We ourselves, we're not really active on the trading side, but of course we teach it. Just like half an hour ago, I finished a session on crypto basics about the creation of Bitcoin addresses and their importance and how it really works. So from ground up, of course, using Python because we are like the Python guys, right? And it is fascinating. And I think it's also for younger people. I mean, my son, for example, is 15, maybe a little bit too young to get into the tech side of things. He for sure knows what Bitcoin are. Bitcoins are like the tokens, right? But also like an interesting field for the younger generation to enter early and to master, I don't know, the math that is required in the field and all the other techniques like blockchain, smart contracts, etc., that have been growing over recent years in this field. So pretty exciting. But again, and people who follow me on Twitter or whatever, they know that I'm not a big Bitcoin believer in terms of a currency, because I don't think it's really a currency. From a technological point of view, I think what people have created, they are some smart contracts. They say, well, I don't need some, I don't know, lawyers, notaries and whatnot to come up with a contract. Then we need the law, whatever this means, like the courts, etc., and people who make sure that contracts are enforced. But once you have this in electronic form, that's of course a huge efficiency gain. But of course there are difficulties as well. But we're still pretty nascent with all these things. I mean, for me as a finance guy, what is called DeFi, decentralized finance. It's still all pretty nascent, but I'm pretty sure that we see there many innovations. If this will fully replace at least parts of our current system, I'm still doubting at this point. Pretty sure that parts at least will be replaced, but it will not be a revolution, as people say. I don't know. If we fully replace governments and whatever, right? It might be a long way, maybe in the future, and then we have reached a level of Star Trek or Star Wars.
Fair enough. Well, they are saying that it's in El Salvador already. So there are a couple countries that are looking at things like Bitcoin and things like that. So, maybe for some, developing countries, they're taking advantage of it. So who knows? But actually, I want to pick you up on something you also mentioned. So you are pretty much looking at it when, I said, is it the future? You focus more on the technology aspect. So is it fair to say then you're more sort of fascinated with blockchain as opposed to like cryptocurrencies itself?
Yeah, I mean, this all, of course, depends on each other, but I'm not like the guy who says, well, I'm pretty sure Bitcoin will reach $1 million US. So one Bitcoin as an exchange rate, right, will be worth 1 million US. I don't see that. I also could imagine that we would see one or maybe 2 or 3 black swan events where the whole thing bursts. I'm old enough to have lived and even worked through the bubble that burst 2000, 2001. So what was called back then the new economy, where everybody was saying, well, now like, I studied business administration and economics in particular, financial economics. And people said suddenly, well, there's a new economy and the rules are completely different, right? Valuations have changed. This has changed. There's like small companies, 50 people are now more worth than well-established 100-year-old companies that produce cars, I don't know, whatever, right? And suddenly it bursts. And I personally could see something like this with the crypto space as well. And we have just seen, it was like a complete burst. But if something drops like in a very short period of time by 50%, this says that, well, there are forces at work, that are hard to describe and that almost nobody really understand, right? It cannot be only faith in something and believing in some narrative that you say, well, this is where I bet my future on. Again, the technology is there. It has been around in part long ago. The fundamental new combinations that they've created, they are fantastic. What will survive, we will see. It's the same with like the new economy where we saw the bubble burst. Of course, Amazon was in existence before that. Apple was there before, right? Facebook was there. Google was just before around. So they all survived. The big and the good things will survive, but not everything that we see there. And when I hear like more than 100 new tokens have been issued and there are airdrops and blah, blah, blah. So honestly, I cannot stand it anymore. This has become complete nonsense, at least in part, from my point of view.
Okay, no, that's fair enough. And this actually segues into another thing that relates to the whole crypto phenomenon, which is NFTs. I want to get your thoughts on NFTs because you were talking about the .com bubble there earlier, talking about this, when there's a new phenomenon and there's all this hype and people invest very heavily, but then it gets to a point where everything kind of bursts and the recession, et cetera, et cetera. But do you see that trend then when you talk about, or when I bring up NFTs then? Are you a believer in NFTs? Do you think it's a fad? Why is there such a hype around NFTs?
Yeah, what people call in general Web3, right? So I was growing up with a little bit of art, and my father-in-law, I'm married since more than 20 years, is also an art dealer. Our home is full of art, right? So I still prefer like a proper picture from, 1700 something or 1800. Made by a human being that might not be around anymore, as compared to some pseudo art that I can somehow acquire for usually lots and lots of money, like a variant 2017 of a weird looking ape, right? So personally, I don't get it. Of course, if you are in that game and you're early and understand it and you can arbitrage your way up in terms of like buying cheap and selling to others who are willing to pay more, I think you can make money like many people have become millionaires and even billionaires in the crypto space in this context. But to have a right to a tweet, a right to whatever, personally, I cannot even relate to this. I cannot even imagine how this should feel, how you would feel if you have something like this. I say, well, I have here the token which says that I'm the owner of this weird looking ape there. I'm sorry, this is something I don't really get. So last week I bought some modern art to smaller paintings from a local artist. This is something I can relate to personally. I don't know if I would have bought it. Maybe it's always a matter of price, maybe. But if I would have bought it, it would have been just something electronic. My hard disk here is full of stuff. I don't know if anybody would be willing to pay for what is there. So I have a hard time of getting it. Maybe some people say, well, he's just like stubborn or doesn't get it. And then, of course, you just need to look around on YouTube how many proponents and messiahs are there saying, well, that's the next thing. And the big investors like Andreessen Horowitz, etc., pushing billions, let's say, into the field. But again, I don't need to get everything. Maybe I'm a bit too old.
Well, fair enough.
I simply don't see it.
Okay, no, that's fair. I'm a bit unsure myself personally. I'm just more, because I'm more of a technology person, I'm more interested from that lens. So I think I'm more interested in blockchain more generally, as opposed to, whether it be cryptocurrencies or NFTs, et cetera, for me personally. But I guess for you then, just to wrap up the NFT thing, in 5-10 years from now, do NFTs still exist, or is it going to be like a fad that we say, remember the NFT?
I'm pretty sure this will be around. It's like, it's like the same thing with the metaverse, right? You now read articles and hear about discussions. People say, shall I buy some real estate or buy something X, Y, that in the metaverse, etc. I don't know who is like concerned with that on a daily basis, right? every morning when I walk or run with my dogs through the forest, I don't need a metaverse, right? So to have like connection to nature and to life. So there are many things that are, and I sit, trust me, many hours on a daily basis in front of screens, right? So I'm not against technology per se, but if you should now live fully in there, like in a Matrix-like world, I'm not sure about that part of the story.
Fair enough. And you're talking there again, referencing, the fact that you run a lot of virtual sessions. Part of your virtual sessions, then, do you talk about blockchain itself in those lessons?
Yeah, we have but that's actually kind of a newer class that we have. I call it Crypto Basics, where we go through really the building blocks that make up the whole ecosystem, like hashing, encryption, signing, blockchains, Merkle trees, the mining itself, so currency, smart contracts. So we go building block by building block and discuss the technology. And this is more like meant to be as a background information for people who trade in the markets or want to do more on that side.
Okay, and for the benefit of people listening, could you kind of explain blockchain a little bit more?
I mean, what you read, is like the short definition of a blockchain is simply an immutable database, right? Immutable meaning that once it's written down, what has happened, the transaction or whatever, it should not be possible to change the record, right? So when you have something on your computer or you are able to hack a bank, right, you simply change the small little number or the large number that is associated with your bank account, right? Then suddenly you might have much more money if you're the one who's doing it, or much less money, right? And with a blockchain, the basic idea and the benefit should be that this shouldn't be possible because all the compute power in the world, so that's the theory, should be able to rebuild the blockchain in a way that it's still consistent. This requires quite a bit more than just a little bit of hashing and certain techniques that again have been around in the crypto space since quite a while, even before Bitcoin. This requires certain techniques, and Bitcoin has solved it already kind of pretty well. And when you see how large the blockchain, right, the ledger, right, with all the transactions, with all the blocks has become, that's a huge thing, and not a single entity in this world, maybe from another world, extraterrestrial, will be able to rebuild the blockchain. But in principle, the mechanism has worked in the sense of that all the previous transactions, everything that is currently going on, is documented in a way, both ownership, also exchange of Bitcoin, etc., and a couple of other transactions that the network can handle, so that nobody, in theory, I think also in practice currently, is able to change it. That's the major promise of the blockchain. And you can build it with a few lines of Python code. You can build pretty simple examples. If you then combine it with signing mechanisms, digital cryptographical signing mechanisms, and a few other tricks, then you can make it pretty safe that nothing can be changed.
I also wanted to just find out a little bit about yourself personally. How did you get into finance in the first place? Was it something, maybe, passed down generations? What's the story of you getting into finance?
Yeah, no, really, I was always fascinated by markets and finance, but there is no family history whatsoever in this context. So when I did my military service, I was already in like a finance department, quote unquote, but this was not, I think, the kickoff. But when I started studying business administration back then, it's a while back, I was trying to focus as much as possible on finance. I did like banking, financial market theory, monetary policy. I did my diploma thesis in economics, financial economics. Yeah, and later on, did my PhD in mathematical finance about option hedging and impact on markets. And this is, I love finance from the beginning, and it's still the case. I'm still fascinated by it, both traditional finance and modern data-driven and AI-based finance, right? And with Python, this has become even more of a passion because you now have the tool at your fingertips where you can do finance in real time on a large scale in a very flexible manner, right? When I was writing my PhD, it was pretty theoretical, with like theorem, proposition, lemma, proofs, and a few numerical examples. But these days, you really have like the finance world that you can work with, right? You can interact with the markets, you can do X, Y, that. I needed to pay like, I don't know, 20 Deutschmarks back then for a pretty small data set, a tiny data set. And I crunched it in Excel. This was like the highest level back then. So we have come a long way, and it's still a fascinating field for me.
And what about technology then? How did you become interested in, technology? Obviously, we've been talking about Python quite a bit here. Python's obviously a big part of your everyday. How did you get into programming, technology in general?
Yeah, I think all started roughly at the age of my son. He's now upstairs and playing games on his gaming computer with the i9 and I don't know, with a NVIDIA graphics card, RTX 380 Ti, whatever they have these days. For me, it was at that age, it was the Commodore C64. And even back then, I was playing games, of course, like everybody was doing, but I was already writing code in BASIC at the beginning, but later exclusively in assembler, what we all did back then, if you wanted to achieve something. So I was always fascinated by coding and writing stuff on my own and see it blinking and running on the screen. But this was a tiny bit lost when I got started studying. I still, of course, needed to use computers, didn't play anymore, but the programming part was more or less lost. I started out after my diploma as a management consultant, where I still was using computers again, but I didn't program anymore. So I wanted to have like more generalist manager style education, and this is what I did. But I'm happy that I got back to the technology world with Python. And when I saw Python for the first time, it was well long before NumPy and all the other fantastic packages that we have around these days. I saw already the potential for the financial domain and doing the stuff that we today do with it. Many people that I spoke to back then said, well, Yves, you're ridiculous. This doesn't work. We need C++. We need X, Y, that. Python will never play a role in finance and the financial industry, at least not a major role. And now it has become one of the core technology platforms for some of the biggest institutions around the world, such as JP Morgan, Bank of America, all the big hedge funds, all the asset managers, etc. So we've come a long way, but Python is now, I would say, the number one technology. And this is, among others, driven also by the prominence in the AI and machine learning field. That's for sure. But I think that's a little longer while until there is another language which gets the same importance as Python now has in our industry.
Fair enough. And just to home in more about Python, you also, I believe it's a book, Python and Algorithmic Training, or session or something like that. I think as I was looking into
Python for Algorithmic Trading is one of my books. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So do you want to explain that a little bit more? Because that sounds particularly interesting as well. I know we've been talking about it.
Yeah, if we're talking about this is basically what the subtitle says, from idea to deployment. So this is chapter by chapter going through what I consider major building blocks, and where you see how it works from the very first steps with the environment and crunching a little bit of data, doing some backtesting, coming up with strategies and backtesting them based on vectorized backtesting, event-based backtesting, getting started with streaming data, which is so important, and then mastering the APIs that you require simply to get data in real time to execute trades. And then there's also a chapter which puts it all together about automation, right? So this is really, I would say, a process-oriented book. You get started with an idea and you hopefully end up with something properly deployed in the cloud.
Okay. Cool. And again, it's the same place, right, where people can, look more into all the stuff that you've done as well. That will be there too.
Yeah, it's the same page, right? We have a sub-page with all of my books on there, but if and just started on the main page, that's good enough. Right?
Okay. And expanding on that, then, where can people reach you if they want to go beyond, your website, if they want to find out a little bit more about your, you've already discussed your opinions on NFTs or things about, crypto, for example. If people want to find out more information about you, social media, et cetera, where can people reach out?
Yeah, they can find me on Twitter, so BYGH, or on LinkedIn. If you Google my name, Yves Hilpisch. We have a YouTube channel where we post like webinars, and I'm just running a free webinar series about reinforcement learning and finance, for example. We just opened also a what we call Quants at Dev Discord group, where we have over a couple of last, 3 weeks, 3-4 weeks, we have already close to 600 members in that group with active discussions about quant finance, not only Python, but different packages, technologies, crypto trading, strategies, and papers, education, events, etc. So if you're interested in the field, the Discord group, for example, is also a good place to chat with other, mostly professionals, I must say. Of course, we also have students and people interested, but the major discussions are led there by professionals who are doing that stuff since quite a while. So many different places. If people have my name, there shouldn't have any issue either from my website or with my name to find me via Google or on the different platforms. That's
cool.
That's for sure.
All right, no worries. We'll definitely also put that on the screen as well, some of the things that you mentioned as well to help people. Why don't you leave us with some final words as well? So it could be something that, we've missed during this conversation, maybe something that you really want to get out there to people listening, beginners, whatever. Leave us with some final words.
Yeah, this is what I would tell my son if he asked me for a recommendation. What shall I do later on, Daddy? And this is, I would say, independent of age, almost independent. So if you're good at math, if you're good at Python programming, and if you know a bit of the English language, you're well versed. So we live in this, from my point of view, 3-language world. Of course, I'm true for my field, finance, but for many other fields, this holds true as well. If you have these skills available, I think, and the name of your project of your company, SkillStruct, right? If you have these 3 skills available, I think in the current world and the future world, it will be basically unbeatable, and you can adjust and adapt to anything that might show up in the future. Right?
Awesome. There you go. A lot shorter, right? Let us know if that's what you prefer from our conversations. Let us know if there's a particular topic you want us to tackle. It can be in and around technology. Technology is quite a broad topic, right? So if there's something that you really want to have a good conversation, let us know. If you want us to go back to the long form, let us know. If you like the shorter format, let us know in the comment section. But hey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. But until next time, SkillStruct out. This is a SkillStruct presentation. If you like what you hear and see, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.